All right, great, everyone. Thank you. Welcome. Thanks for joining. My name is Nate Prorok. I am the Senior Program Manager with the Catalyst Program and the Director of the UCSF LaunchPad. LaunchPad aims to work with students and trainees at UCSF. So that includes postdocs, medical residents, clinical fellows, and share with them the entrepreneurial mindset. So despite whatever they're studying, or training on, they can learn to think like an entrepreneur. And one of the ways that we do that is through fireside chats like this, where we have an experienced health tech, med tech operator come in and share some of their stories, some of their background, a little bit of a case study. And so this session is being recorded. It's an absolutely beautiful day in San Francisco. So even if people have having a great time right now, they can watch it on Saturday when we're expecting some rain. So without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce Patrick Beattie. Patrick has spent over 15 years developing new and innovative technologies to create change in biotechnology, pharmaceutical research and development, and healthcare delivery. His background in health tech and entrepreneurship includes serving as the first employee at Diagnostics For All, which is a nonprofit point-of-care diagnostics company, and co-founding Redbird, a digital health tech startup enabling pharmacies to offer paid rapid test services in West Africa. Patrick earned a Bachelor's of Science in Chemical Engineering from Princeton University and an MBA from the University of Oxford. So, Patrick, again, thank you so much for being here. We'd love to hear a little bit more about that journey. I just, very, very high level. And so we're going to turn the floor over to you. I have a few questions that I have prepared if you don't touch on them. And for everybody else here, please feel free to write any questions in the chat, raise your hand, or feel free to just chime in when you have anything you'd like to share or ask. Great. Thank you. Patrick, thanks again.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Nate. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Excited to share with you my journey from, the earliest stages of my entrepreneurial journey to where I'm at today. I'm going to, I guess, start at the end for a second here because this, most of what I want to talk about is that journey. But just to let you know what I'm doing now, which is not much of what we'll cover. I currently work for VentureWell, which is a nonprofit that helps entrepreneurs or innovators with a technology on their entrepreneurial journeys. And so we run accelerator programs for both university students, whether that's grad student, undergrad, MDs, MBAs, with their concept around transitioning a technology into a company, or whether that's existing companies that are looking to fundraise and curious about that part of the journey. So that's what I'm doing now, based here in Seattle, and focused on the US market. But what I want to talk to you about today is everything I've done before that, which is before VentureWell, everything I've done has been in the startup world. And it's been just always at the earliest stages of a company's development. It's been really a quite exciting time, I thought, and a really enjoyable one.
Hey, Patrick, can I just ask a quick question since you're going to shift away from VentureWell? I know VentureWell's running the entire ARPA-H Venture Catalyst program, all the spokes in Venture Catalyst. And obviously there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them. And so I have two questions. One is, how many people work for VentureWell as employees like you? And then how many, let's say pro bono or volunteers or that type of person helps VentureWell?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, VentureWell runs the Boston hub, at least, of the ARPA-H program, the Investor Catalyst hub, and I believe there's two others. That's actually that's a different vertical. However, the person who runs that is also in Seattle. They were the only two VentureWell people, so I do have some exposure to it. But VentureWell is, I believe, roughly, it's been a lot of growth recently, especially with the Investor Catalyst hub. I believe we're now around 150 full-time employees. We operate either in the commercialization vertical, which is that investor hub, looking at commercializing, helping commercialize biotechnology,
Wow.
or the collegiate focused, education focused vertical, which if you've ever done an I-Corps program that VentureWell's been supporting on, it runs after that. That's our engagement a lot with professors to incorporate the entrepreneurial activities into their curriculum. And then my group, which focuses on startup support, mainly we call it the ventures team, and we're working with entrepreneurs, whether they just have a tech and an idea or that company mindset. And within our program is where we engage a lot of these pro bono or external mentors. One of the things we really try to do is make sure that entrepreneurs working with us are getting not just our opinions, but expert opinions from mentors in the field. So at my programs, we make sure for every startup we have in the program, we try to get an equal number of active investors to act as mentors and provide their feedback to the companies, to these entrepreneurs, so that they're hearing how the other side of the table thinks about what they're building.
Oh, got it. That's really interesting. Do you think, excuse me, being a nonprofit is actually an advantage vis-a-vis, Y Combinator or Techstars or something? I mean, I'm kind of seeing it that could be a real advantage. Well, notwithstanding your connections with both NSF Core and ARPANET H.
Yeah, I mean it's a different model, and the Y Combinator for-profit take equity share model definitely has had huge impact and success. And what we're able to do as a nonprofit, though, I think, is focus on entrepreneurs, industries, and geographies that may oftentimes get overlooked. And so we do a lot of work. While we do work within the main ecosystems, when you think of venture, obviously the Bay Area, Boston, New York, places like that. We do a lot of work where entrepreneurs are working outside of that. We do a lot at the Great Lakes. Houston is another one. Tulsa is where one of our programs will be this year. So we're able to find entrepreneurs where they might not already be located, or for whatever personal reasons, they can't relocate necessarily to those main hubs, and support them there. Same thing with our industries. We're able to focus on what we call harder tech industries, things where, like medical device, where you have that longer pathway. Not to say there's not venture support for it, otherwise we couldn't really work within it, but there's not as much, and those companies need more support to get to the point that they're able to start having be a better fit for venture funding.
Got it. Hey, thanks a lot.
No worries. Always happy to talk more afterwards. We can share my contact information too, anything about VentureWell. But great. But let me kind of tell you how I got into it, I guess, to begin with, because I wasn't always, well, it feels like I was always in the startup scene, but when I was an undergrad, I studied chemical engineering, and I was fortunate to be able to do a lot of research as part of that, even as an undergrad, and really focus in on the biological side of chemical engineering. So I was working on nanoparticles for drug delivery systems, and forming those and stabilizing them with the concept of cancer therapy or other nanoparticle delivery reasons. But I wasn't necessarily thinking about startups at that time. I was very much just interested in the technology. I actually, right afterwards, I didn't even go into the startup scene. I did 3 years as a Peace Corps volunteer in West Africa, which would end up coming back into play with the startup journey. But at that time wasn't viewed as something like that. It's when I came back to the US after those 3 years, and I started looking at places I wanted to work or live, and what was interesting to me. And I got very interested in this startup concept. I didn't really know what it was, but I heard that there was a lot of interesting innovation on technology, biotechnology specifically, that was happening in Boston as part of the startup scene. So I moved to Boston to check it out because I'm originally from Anchorage, Alaska. There's not a ton of biotech that was going on up there, so I felt like I was going to move somewhere. And so why not check out this scene? And I was very fortunate in that I connected with an old professor of mine, a former professor of mine, I should say, And through him and hearing my background, my journey since I graduated, he connected me with a founding team that was spinning technology out of George Whiteside's lab at Harvard, this paper microfluidic technology that they had built, with the concept of spinning it out into a nonprofit diagnostics company to develop diagnostics that were focused on low resource settings, so ultra low cost diagnostics for low resource settings. And they were looking for the first person, the person who was going to start it. And to me, that was a dream opportunity, the chance to do science, but also build something outside of just the technology, build an organization. And so I joined on, we got a couple other people, part-time CEO originally, and then eventually, we got a full-time CEO to join on and support, and our couple first scientist hires. But we started doing the research, but at the same time building out our capabilities. We borrowed lab space from a sister company that, since we were a nonprofit, they were willing to donate some lab space to us. So, formed a bench, got the supplies needed, and to start doing the experiments or the product development that couldn't be done in the Harvard lab. In our lab, started building the team, and really started thinking about, okay, how can we take this platform technology, which was paper microfluidics, and apply it to use cases where there was a business use case. And in our case, it was more of a nonprofit business model. But this idea of you need to take this technology that you could do so many different things with and start narrowing it down into and committing to some certain areas. We started with liver function testing, and a lot of that was supported by a Gates Foundation grant, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation grant, that was going to the Whiteside's lab, and then some of that was to support our work in developing the product. And then we started bringing on other opportunities as we found a good fit for the technology with problems that we were identifying in the health space, or even eventually we moved into animal health and agriculture. At one point, we were working on a cow pregnancy diagnostic, milk spoilage diagnostic, and even aflatoxin testing of maize, of corn. But throughout the whole, as we grew, it was constantly just looking at the different technologies, and we brought more technologies from the Whitesides group and other partners into our lab. How we could take that technology and fit it to a problem that wasn't being addressed and that we felt we could uniquely address. As this happened, I started moving out of the lab, right? As we kept hiring, we hired great scientists. And I always like to say, I found it easy to hire scientists better than me, which meant that I, got kind of bumped out of the lab and more into the operations side of the company. But what I liked about that is I was never away from the science. It was that application, finding that right application for the science, and still working closely with the technical team. Was a nice match for me, and I think started pushing me more along the entrepreneurial journey towards eventually becoming a founder. We developed at DFA over the years. I was there for 6 years, and one of the things that I supported at Diagnostics For All DFA was our field testing. So as we developed the technology for a specific product, we would want to get it as early as we could into the hands of potential users. We never did it early enough, in my opinion. It was something we got better at with every product, and still every time we finally got it into the hands of some sort of prototype, we realized we should have done it 6 months prior. You can never get into, get your idea, your product in front of potential customers or users early enough, in my mind. It was something we tried to get better at as we did, but we were always looking to be even better. But I would go with Diagnostics For All, represent in field trials, which was a great opportunity. A lot of our trials, it just depended where we were doing them, but a lot of them ended up in sub-Saharan Africa, which is my experience there. Part of why I was involved in helping run these trials, or their tests that we were doing. And one of the things that I always did, since I had the opportunity, again, our focus was on low resource settings, is I would try to have as many conversations with potential users of the technologies, of diagnostic tests, to understand what their thoughts were regarding their needs. So one of the groups I loved going to were pharmacists, because pharmacists in a lot of the countries we were working in, they provided actually a decent amount of primary care. And they were in a setting that was very much point of care, the types of diagnostics we were developing, but very limited in what they had access to. So I would go into these pharmacists and I would chat with them, and I'd say, hey, like, tell me a question you wish you could answer for your patients. What are your customers, your patients coming in and asking you that you can't give them an answer to, and you wish you could? Like what sort of test result do you wish you could give them right here on the spot that you can't? And in my mind, what I was trying to figure out was, what should our next test be? I wanted to know what they didn't have access to that we should look to develop. And what I discovered was the answer that I got was often a type of diagnostic that, from a technical standpoint, was solidly done. It was addressed. It was a great technology, already existed out there. So they would say things like, oh, I really wish I could, tell my patients what their blood sugar was. And, I look at that and, the glucometer is widely available, I thought, but the technology was so sound. It wasn't that the technology wasn't right. There was something in between the technology and this end user that was keeping them from being able to give this answer. Similarly, I heard things like anemia. Okay, anemia wasn't as well known, but I knew that there were some great tests out there. And I struggled to see how our technology was really going to be enough of an improvement to address whatever barrier that was keeping these pharmacists from being able to offer this information to their patients. And this was really the start of the next stage of my journey. It was appreciating this and recognizing that we were spending all of this effort at DFA using a technology to develop new tests. And it was something that I thought really needed to be done. And I still think that it was a good thing to be working on, because there are technology problems that could be solved with new technology. But speaking to these pharmacists, I realized that even if we were successful in building these new diagnostics, there was another barrier. There was a market barrier that was keeping great technology that already existed from getting into use and benefiting patients, which was our eventual aim, was not just to develop the technology, but have it be in use. And it started bothering me, and it kept gnawing at me, and eventually it annoyed me enough that I realized that this is what I wanted to work on, that I wanted to figure out how we could help this market side of the problem, so that once my colleagues at my current company then or did develop a new test, it actually had a pathway to impact, real world impact. So after 6 years at Diagnostics For All, loved it. It was a great, really enjoyed being there, but I knew I had to leave. I knew I was now so obsessed with this problem, or just annoyed, really, is how it more felt, with this problem I was seeing, that I wanted to start my own company to see if we could crack the market side of the problem. And so that's what I did. I left. I spent a year at Oxford doing an MBA. Honestly, it was more about taking the time to look at different potential markets for this idea and develop the concept a bit more. It was nice to get the degree, of course. It was nice to do the academic learning around a lot that I had learned on the fly at Diagnostics For All, just building something from scratch. But really, I was looking at, okay, this is a year to refine the idea in a safe space and identify different markets. The market I got most excited about for a variety of reasons was Ghana in West Africa. And so I decided I need to move there and check it out and get to know it better. Because again, especially if you're a market innovation, but really any innovation, the closer you are to your customers, the better position you're in. And I knew that I couldn't come up with a solution that was going to be right without having that engagement with the customers. So I moved to Ghana. I needed to pay rent and things like that when I first got there. So luckily, a company I had done some work for based out of Tanzania wanted to expand to Ghana, and they wanted to set up a new company there. And I said, hey, look, I'll get you up and running while I get a feel for the market, and then once I'm ready to move on, that's probably going to line up with when you're ready for more full-time or more long-term person to replace me. And it seemed like a win-win. They agreed. So that was a great experience. They were a medical supply company, so I got to know the healthcare system. I got to understand the regulations that were in that country in Ghana, which helped with everything I wanted to do, as well as their company. And most importantly, it gave me the time to meet the right person. And about a year after moving to Ghana, I met my co-founder, Andrew Kwao, Ghanaian pharmacist. We met, it's not one of those things you can necessarily rush meeting your co-founder. And so it did take a full year, but it was a year of just going to events, being networked into the space. And then one day I happened to be at an event that I was helping at, and I saw him pitch, and the next week we were working together in our spare time. It's just one of the, you saw that alignment, and we got coffee the next week, and before we knew it, we were working in the evenings and on the weekends, just trying to, again, understand the market better. At the early stage, there was so much that we needed to learn still, that we could spend a weekend at the mall just surveying people, asking how they accessed healthcare, what they felt comfortable going to a pharmacy for versus not. And that was hugely valuable to us and giving us that information that you can't get just doing market research, sitting in your office or behind a desk or wherever you're at. So we did that for about a year as well, and then felt that it was the right time for us to quit our jobs, go full time. We had this concept of taking existing diagnostic devices, so not trying to develop them like I was previously, but take already approved diagnostic devices, bundle them together. We earmarked about 10 of them that we wanted to put together literally just into a box, and then pair that up with some software so that you could input health records if a patient did get a test done, and then do that out of pharmacies, enable a pharmacy to offer those services. And so a mini clinic within a pharmacy that we were of the one-stop shop for a pharmacy who wants to start offering those services. And so, I'm getting close to, I think, where I'll pause and then just open it up for discussion. But the last thing I want to maybe talk about are those really early days and that importance of iterating on any little bit of traction that you can get to get yourself to the next level. So, we had this vision, okay, mini clinics, software. At one point we were thinking, these kiosks that you just put into a pharmacy, and it was so easy for us to get wrapped up into this long-term vision with it. But tell you what, we didn't have money because it was just an idea at that point. We had done a few pitch competitions, and we scraped together maybe like $7,000, $10,000, something like that. But that wasn't going to get you very far with that big vision of amazing software, a kiosk, all these things. And when we looked at it, we realized when we talked to people about it, the number one question we got was, okay, the idea sounds good, but how do you know people are going to actually pay for this? And so the first thing we did is we went to the mall on weekends and started just interviewing people. Hey, how much would you pay if you could test your blood sugar, your cholesterol? if you could test for malaria. And they gave us some information, and then as we pitched, we would say that information, and it was better than nothing. But the next question was still, okay, but how do you really know if they're going to pay for this? People will say anything, but like, how can you de-risk that willingness to pay? And we realized that was the number one question we were getting. And so we said, look, we've got this big vision of what we want to be, but right now, what we need to prove is that someone will buy it. So we took what money we had, we went to retail places that were selling these diagnostics, not the wholesalers you want to be going from. Obviously, this wasn't a viable long-term business model, but we went to them and we just bought a couple boxes of each of them. We bought Tupperware bins, put all the boxes in it, not the beautiful kiosk we were imagining. But we said, okay, we got a bin now of 10 different, I think even back then maybe we were just doing 5 tests. And 5 tests. We bought 2 really cheap blue netbooks that were just terrible little pieces of equipment. And we paid someone, I think it was $300 to develop the worst, and I say this with so much affection, the worst health record software you can imagine. But it was perfect because the question wasn't, can you develop beautiful health software? That's not the question we were getting. The question wasn't even, will people like the software? We wanted the software so that we could see, how much people were actually using the stuff. But the question was, will people buy this? So we took our terrible netbooks and our terrible software and this, ridiculous tub of diagnostics, and we went to 2 pharmacies and we said, listen, we want to teach you how to perform these tests. We're going to put this in your pharmacy. And you don't have to pay us anything except for what you sell. So 0 risk to you, because right now that's not the important question. The important question is, will a patient come in and actually pay money? So we're going to teach you how to do it. We're going to put these here. If you don't sell anything, it's fine. Anything you do sell, we're going to come back. We'll see what you've used up, and you can just pay us for that. And here's the fee. And so we found 2 pharmacies willing to do this. Within a month, we were going back to the pharmacy and trying to get a USB to to download the data from these blue netbooks, and it was a disaster as well. But we were going back and we said, okay, let us count the tests. And one of our pharmacies just said, look, guys, it's selling. Just let me pay you. I don't want you to bother me. I don't have time for you to come in here and start counting stuff. I'm just going to pay it. And that was, priceless. The fact that we had that amount of traction, we had patients who were coming in paying. We could point to that now. It wasn't huge revenue, but we were getting revenue. We had, interest from the pharmacy, and I'll just pay for these so that you guys can get out of my hair. That enabled us to then apply to some accelerator programs, and it puts you just even that little bit, that little activity that didn't take us that long, puts you on a whole nother level from just ideas. And so it was so important to us at that early stage, was identifying what's the most important question, and what's the smallest thing we can do to answer that question to the degree we can. And as soon as you do it, you just get another question. But it's that kind of micro traction that, just doing that on repeat. Okay, now what's the next thing? Eventually got us to the ability to raise a pre-seed round, which then enabled us to develop proper software, refine our pitch to pharmacies, start building a real company around this. But it was, that close engagement with our customers, and just identifying the feedback we were getting from investors, from anyone we talked to about it, really, of their questions, to move along that journey. Eventually, we were, in 650 pharmacies in the 2 major cities in Ghana. They were all using our software, performing tests that we were supplying to them, that we were at that point buying from either direct from manufacturers or wholesalers, and performing. I don't even remember at this time. We had a couple 100,000 patients who were registered in our system and building their own personal digital health record. But it all started with that early traction and just like, step after step after step. Unfortunately, at the end of 2022, just to end this and then open for questions, we needed to raise another round of funding so that we could expand, but also keep our operations going. It was an incredibly bad time to want to be raising money, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, especially in West Africa. And long story short, we weren't able to do it. So we did have to shut down the company. We wound it down. We helped find our staff new opportunities and give them the support we could. And then had to have the discussion with our investors, who honestly were all great about it. They know the game that they get into. And as long as we had a great relationship with them throughout the building, and therefore it really helped at the end. And then I'm ended up back in the US. So that's the journey. There's plenty more I can talk to. I'm happy to take any questions about that approach or any part of that journey.
Yeah, Patrick, thank you very much. That's really interesting. And, I'm writing down bunches of questions, and I see Rupa has her hand raised. So I'm going to turn it over to Rupa.
I think for me, this is a very interesting talk, just because I worked in global health at BioVentures for Global Health on the WIPO Research Consortium. And I was wondering, like, this may not be really so much on the thing. Where did you do your Peace Corps? Was it in Ghana? Was it Cameroon or some other country in West Africa?
So I did 2 years as a maths teacher in the Gambia and a year as a chemistry teacher in Guinea.
Okay.
So it wasn't Ghana. I had visited and done a little bit of work in Ghana before I moved there, and that was part of what enticed me. But I had done a lot of work in Kenya and had been thinking of Kenya as well. What I really liked about Ghana at that time is there was a good public-private spend. So I knew there was a private market for healthcare that I could work within and iterate quickly. And I also felt that the entrepreneurship ecosystem was just super early, but obviously growing. And it was exciting to be a part of that, where, when I got to Ghana that first year, I was working out of a co-working space, and it was literally just, hotspots on tables that they kind of tossed around, and normally no AC going. And then, fast forward even just 3 years later, you wouldn't have recognized the place. And it's continued to grow. And so to me personally, it was also an exciting place to be a part of that early stage ecosystem.
And were the two cities Kumasi and Accra, or somewhere else?
Yep, we launched in Accra, and then after about a year, after about a year from launching, we realized again we were at a pharmacy, a nationwide pharmacy conference, and we just had enough people come up to us and say, "Why aren't you in Kumasi?" That the next Monday, when we had everyone back in the office after supporting that conference, we just looked at everyone and we said, "Seems like we should be in Kumasi." We were planning to do that a year later, but you can't argue when you're getting the customer feedback. And so we went there, and it was a great success setting that team up and just seeing everything they did there. I'm so glad that we listened to the feedback we were getting.
And just out of curiosity again, and I'll let others go, but did you work, like, say, with the university, like KCCR at Kumasi or any of the universities, or are you focused exclusively on the pharmacies? And did you try getting some of it into the public healthcare system, or fully on the private?
We did some networking within the universities. Actually, some of our staff members who joined on, our employees, would come from, say, the university labs, like Nguchi there, and come to join us. So there was some connection there. But we were very focused on our for-profit customer. Andrew and I, and our third co-founder, Ed, decided early on that our experience had been with grant funding, but we wanted to focus this really solidly within venture-backed funding model. And that meant that we also really wanted to be focused on our, our customer that we knew we were growing with and was paying with. We did eventually, especially as we built the data side of what we were doing, because we were getting, real-time diagnostic data from, distributed geolocated sources. We wanted to bring that into the public health system, especially around, say, malaria diagnosis, because we could tell you how many malaria tests were being performed in each neighborhood and what the positivity rate was in real time. But again, honestly, a lot of the speed that they worked at just wasn't working with us, and we were a very lean team because of our funding situation. So we had to focus on that. I wish we would have been able to do more, but you have to make calls when you're a small company.
Sure. I'll let others. I don't want to ask more questions. I have a lot of questions, but I'll hold.
Yeah. Patrick, did you always know during your first few years in West Africa that you wanted to return there at some point for a part of your career?
I wouldn't say I knew it, but I do remember, in fact, Edward, he was the only other non-Ghanaian on our team, the only other American, and ended up, he came to help. He was our CTO, so he joined as a co-founder. And I do remember part of the reason he came is he and I having conversations saying, we felt job creation and entrepreneurship could have a huge impact in places because when we were in the Gambia, a lot of we were both teaching, and so we were trying to drive people towards university, and then we were seeing that there weren't many opportunities post-university, right? And so there was always an interest, and we told each other, hey, if either of us ever comes back and decides to start something, the agreement was you at least have to tell the other person. And so, when Andrew and I realized we needed a CTO, and Andrew asked if I knew anyone, I was like, well, I got a guy and I got to tell him anyways, because I made a promise. And he flew out he was living in Hong Kong at the time, flew back to Ghana, and within I think 2 days there, we had him hooked, and he ended up leaving his job and coming. So there was always an interest, but I think what really did it for me in the end, definitely part of what encouraged me to leave Diagnostics for All to do this was the time I was spending in Nairobi. And at that time, the Nairobi ecosystem was at that early stage and taking off. And I realized that the most exciting startup stuff I was hearing was when I was spending time in Nairobi. And I wanted to be where I was seeing that explosive growth in sub-Saharan Africa. So that's, I think, more of when I realized that I wanted to do something on the continent. It was just seeing how Nairobi had turned into this innovation hub, and I felt other cities were doing the same thing.
When I graduated college, I did a long-term volunteer placement in Peru, and became, good friends with a bunch of, Peace Corps volunteers as well as in my group. And, this was over 10 years ago now, but in those 10 years, I found so many of my cohort and friends that I developed returning to the areas where they did their service for, different reasons, whether it was something in their heart that was calling them to return, or just the opportunity presented itself. So I think I don't have any anecdotal, or it's all anecdotal information, but I think it's really, really cool that you're able to, spend even more extended time there. Great. Jake, sorry, you could comment on that. I'm going to pass it on to Jake if you want.
Great, thank you. I'm just curious. So we've been hearing about, with interest rates the way they are these days, the days of kind of round after round of funding may be gone for a while at least, and startups need to focus more on profitability at the earlier stages. Do you think if you had it to do over again, you would have changed anything, or there would have been a path to profitability and being able to sustain that venture for a longer time?
Oh, I trust me. I think a lot of things I would change over the times. It's something I'm sure I'll continue to think of in good ways and bad. I mean, I don't think it doesn't keep me up at night anymore. But it's always things you're thinking of. And I try to break it into two types of things I would change. There were, things I would change in hindsight that I couldn't have known about then. And that stuff is easier to sleep with. And then there's things that in hindsight I should have done differently, even with the information I had then. And in terms of profitability and raising, yeah, I think you always need to be understanding the market you're working within, and understanding that it can change. 2022 for us, it was just a really bad time to need to be raising. Our numbers were good, but they weren't the best out there in terms of our growth. It was more linear than exponential. And in 2022, only exponential was, even had a chance to raise money. In 2021, it was an entirely different world. I wish we had been ready to raise in 2021, because there was, it was much different investment space. And now, especially in kind of this extended, difficult to raise time, or at least difficult compared to earlier, recent history, you need to consider, yeah, is this, can you count on raising those? And also, what metrics are you being held against? And more and more investors are looking for that clear route to profitability, or that earlier route to breakthrough, or break even, I should say. So, would I do it differently in this landscape? Yeah, probably, but it also was a very deliberate choice made by my co-founders and I. We had a specific conversation early on and said, look, are we doing this as a slow growth turtle approach, where we want to really focus on the earliest we can get to profitability, and maybe that doesn't let us scale, but it keeps things going, or do we want to take a more aggressive but more risky approach? And all three of us agreed that we wanted to go the more aggressive, riskier route. So it was a choice we made at the time. I don't regret that choice, because it was a choice we made at the time, and I think at the time it made a lot of sense for us personally and for the market in general.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I was wondering, what kind of thoughts or advice do you have about how to build a great company, in terms of, what are the most important things to think about?
Oh, there's so much to think about, but I think, especially as I work with more companies now, and get more data points, because now it's not just my company, but I'm helping a lot of startups along the way. I think universally, the thing that really impresses me, and I think a lot of others, and because it's so important and oftentimes not done, is knowledge of your customer. So I tell our tech companies this all the time. You give me two companies, one that the team is an expert in the technology, and the other one, the team is the expert in the people they're solving the problem for, their customer. And 9 times out of 10, I'm taking the customer experts. Not that technology isn't important and you need that, but if you don't understand that customer, the people who really understand a customer and are experts in it, and I mean expert, like in a way that it's not, okay, yeah, I validated this assumption I had, but man, I know this person better than their mother knows them. That's a superpower, because that is where your revenue is going to come from in all your company growth, and it informs so much about the strategy that you have to take over time. So knowledge of customer is absolutely one, and I think it's probably, if you're an expert, the most impressive thing that I see. Building a company is also, it is really important to get that team right. And I don't want to mean that in the way of like scaring people off from, is this the right person team thing? But it's a really important relationship, and it's going to go through some really tough times, especially with your co-founders. And the better foundation you have in terms of how you manage that relationship, the more likely you are to weather those points. I had great relationships with my co-founders, and we still hit some really, really tough points along the way. Some of the things we did early on that helped, and I wish I had continued maintaining, because I think it would have helped in those tougher times as well. When we were first starting out, every week we would, this was advice we got, but every week we would have one meeting where the point of the meeting was to talk about the thing you didn't want to talk about. We called it the dark places meeting, and like you were expected to like bring up the thing that no one wanted to talk about, especially you. And it was super helpful. I mean, it made us address things that were, you know, just waiting to become big problems. And luckily we were able to talk about them early and figure out what we could do to address it. So knowledge of customer, and then your ability to manage your relationship with everyone at your company are two really key things in building.
Yeah, going off that customer discovery a little bit, when you were talking to pharmacies and going into shopping malls and asking questions to anybody you could talk to, did you know you were doing customer discovery, or was that something just intuitive that you were thinking about?
I wouldn't have voiced it as customer discovery, but it was very deliberate. You know, it was okay. Well, it always came for us from a place of what are the questions we're getting, and how can we answer those questions, and that really helped us in the early stages, and that's really where it came from. Looking back on it, okay, oh yeah, it's, you know, customer discovery is what I coach people on now, but it did come from this point of, and this is what I love about the earliest stage of a company is if you have that mindset, it becomes so clear what you're supposed to work on next. It's funny, once we raised money, gosh, like I remember raising I guess it was our pre-seed. Actually, no, it was our seed round. When we raised, it took a long time because COVID hit and everything, and we had gone through so much uncertainty. And we raised our seed round, and you know, everyone at the company was super excited, and I was like in just a terrible mood, because you know, you thought I would be excited by now, but the reality was, in my mind, I was like, oh my God, we've never been further from where we need to be than right now. We've got the resources to do it, but like, you know, we got these resources with the promise, the goal of getting to point B, and we are very much at point A here. And so, you know, I think when you have the resources too, the path you take, you just have so many options. When you are in that super early stage, the thing I love about it is you tend to not have many resources, but also the path is, you know, you can only think a couple steps at a time. And so it makes it, you're constantly getting little wins. And that, you know, you can turn that into a little bit more investment or money or interest or a partnership or whatever is that thing you need to get that next level. And that's really energizing to me, because you feel the difference week to week.
Yeah, I really like how you talk about those little wins and then the micro tractions that you can do and how you leverage those to build that MVP, which really seems to take off everything from there.
Yeah.
Another
Yeah,
question I want you to quickly chime in on a bit is, at UCSF, there are a lot of people who are working in under-resourced areas, whether that's, you know, inner city or whether that's, you know, very rural area in the developing world. And so I'm curious if you have any reflections or recommendations, insights for people who want to do something that's, you know, high tech or high biotech in one of those settings, and, you know, doing good for the world and for those people while also, you know, doing well.
Yeah. Well, so I think it's up to the individual or the team to decide what they're doing it for. And that was a lot of the early conversations we had with our team. Obviously, the social side of what we were doing was important to us, but so was the commercial side of what we were doing. And when you're growing your company, when you're looking for investments, and you know, or funds, or however you're doing it, just the reality, no matter who you are, you're always presenting different faces of your company. It's still the same company, but in different situations, you're talking more about certain aspects of it. But it's important that you and your team understand, what your core is, what is important to you, what isn't important to you, and let that inform where you go to build this company and how you build it. And so that can mean that if impact is the most important thing to you and your team, and more important than other things, you will pursue various avenues. Perhaps, it's okay, well then, if that's it, then, and that's why at Diagnostics For All, we founded ourselves as a nonprofit. It wasn't that the technology didn't have for-profit applications, and we actually tried to build some of those into the nonprofit. But for us, and for the founding team there, they really wanted that control over the impact vision. And so they founded it that way, which was a very odd thing for George Whitesides and Carmichael Roberts, who's a VC, especially at that time, to have been doing. They were known as for-profit people, but it was a deliberate choice because they wanted that to really make sure that the company didn't drift from the impact focus. And I think, with Redbird, we were much more of a hybrid in that impact wasn't the most important thing. We had a feel that, look, if we're a successful health tech company out here, we're going to have a good impact. But we got to be successful to do that. And so, conversations with my founders, our gauge was a little different. When we looked at impact investors, for instance, there were some impact investors that we just felt were too focused on impact, actually, to be a good fit for us. And it's not that they had a bad approach, it's just they weren't the right fit for us. For other companies, they very much were the right fit. And likewise, there were, because working in the area, the geography we were at was important to us. There were many, VCs where it's just we weren't a fit on that side. So there's a whole spectrum of opportunity out there. As long as you and your team, I think, identify what is important to you and have verbalized that with each other and really aligned on that, you can chart a path in terms of what resources are appropriate and which ones are not.
Great. Well, speaking of resources, as we're wrapping this up, I'm putting the link to VentureWell in chat right now for everybody. VentureWell has been a great source from a bunch of people that I've talked about. So Patrick, thank you for all the work that you've done. Thank you for the work that you're continuing to do with these, building new companies and helping entrepreneurs, scientists become entrepreneurs along their way. So we highly recommend that to folks. We've gotten great feedback from people. So
I appreciate it. It was a pleasure to be able to chat with people. I will say entrepreneurship has certainly not been the easiest choice at points of my life. There's times it's been an incredibly enjoyable thing. There's times it's made me miserable. Got to be honest on that. But it's made my life interesting, and that's why I'm still very still very passionate about being involved in it all through the ups and downs.
Great. Patrick, once again, thank you for your time. We really appreciate this. And this will be recorded. I'll send the link to everybody. And again, Patrick, thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.